everyone, it's Salamander. So yeah, a lot has happened recently. After the loss of my last channel, I assumed that I wouldn't be able to create any more Lovestruck videos. I was disappointed. I had so many scripts already written out, and scrapping all that hard work would have sucked. So instead, we're doing something different. It's established that I can't use any content from Voltage. No images, music, footage, nothing. So I won't. They can't take me down for just talking about it. Now I understand that this is very different. There will be no visuals for this video, and I get if that makes you less interested. But for those who'd like to just tab over and listen to me talk about Lovestruck, I hope this can still be entertaining. I still plan to make actual videos about other visual novels along with these, so stay tuned for those if that interests you. Also, yes, I did already make this a full video. If you had already seen that while it was up, you don't really need to watch this one. Though I have added a few things to the script and have re-recorded it for your listening pleasure. Alright, with that all out of the way, today I'm going to be restarting a series where I give some very basic reviews of the female love interests. I've read most of the female routes up to Sweet Enchantments, so I will be working my way up to that point going forward. Laying some ground rules, I will not be reviewing ongoing routes. I feel like it's only fair to review them once they have already concluded. Lovestruck does have a bit of a habit of reviving old routes when they had seemingly concluded, so I may not be spot on with that. Today, I'll be talking about the first 3 female love interests, Medusa, Aurora, and Serena. These are the only female love interests for their respective series, so they're pretty special. It's clear the writers put a lot of effort into making their routes stand out. There will be some minor plot spoilers for each route ahead. I'll begin by talking about Medusa from Astoria Fate's Kiss. Medusa isn't exactly what I would have called my type when it comes to otome girls, at least before I read a route. I usually like the loud, bubbly girls like Aurora, Andy, or Althea. I guess I also like girls with A names. Despite that, I went into Medusa's route with complete optimism, expecting to like it. I didn't even realize at the time my trend with female love interests was louder ones, so it didn't factor into my expectations. Medusa herself is a complex character. She wants someone to trust, but the person she ends up trusting has a connection to the people who made her life hell, and she has to overcome the fear that comes along with that to find her happiness again. The way she breaks down mid-season 1 and lets the MC in is a testament to her trying to open up. I really felt like her emotional struggles were tangible, and I felt for her legitimately, which most routes cannot do for me. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. The setting for the series is New York, and our MC works for Hera. Oh, and obviously Greek gods and monsters are real. Has that been made clear yet? Medusa's visual design is interesting, if you consider the Greek myths. Obviously, Medusa has hair rather than a mass of snakes, but I find her aura to be a little bit more interesting. It's a horse. Now, at first, I didn't understand this because I'm frankly not super brushed up on Greek mythology, despite being an avid fan of the Percy Jackson series growing up. However, I was aware Medusa had a relationship with Poseidon, and that Poseidon created horses, so I figured that this was why. And I wanted to fact check that and make sure, and she had relations with him when he was, and then from her blood came Pegasus? You know what, I'm gonna move on. Ultimately, Medusa is a very attractive character. Red hair is really pretty, and most of her outfits suit her fairly well. I like her formal outfit the most because it not only makes her hair stand out amongst the muted gray of her dress, but it also brings attention to her eyes, as they're also gray. Now, the route itself is well written. I'd wager to say it's one of the more well-written Lovestruck routes. It's well-paced, and I never felt bored by any of the plot lines. They tied everything up neatly by the end and were able to write a satisfying story. Each season has a different main plot, so to briefly summarize the most important parts while spoiling as little as possible. Season 1 was by far my favorite. Medusa's backstory intrigued me, and the more I learned, the more I felt for her, and the more I wanted her to get her aura back. I also understood why she rejected it. I wanted her to overcome that, and gain her powers back and more. My only complaint for Season 1 is that Medusa seems to warm up to the MC really fast, considering that the MC is a Hera agent. And I would have liked a bit more time before Medusa fully trusted the MC. If her breakdown scene had just taken a bit longer to ramp up to, I think it could have done some good. But despite that, it did have an emotional impact, and that's ultimately the most important thing. Season 2 is the one I feel I remember the least, despite a lot happening in it. The main thing I remember is that Medusa's mom figured out that the MC was Hera and tried to steal her power to become the new Hera, which I thought was an okay idea on its own, but Echidna was so nasty about it. That really made it for me. The way she treated Medusa and her sisters was cruel, which made me root for Medusa even more. The third season is a weird one. I liked it because of the emotional parts, but I hated that Medusa was getting involved with gang life again. I'm glad the MC was able to pull her back, and that Medusa was receptive to it, but that didn't make the parts where Medusa was interacting with the gang any less frustrating. The wedding scene was cute, though. Season 4 is just kind of an epilogue season. I didn't care that much. I'm glad to see they stayed together and the twins were cute, but nothing really noteworthy happened. So with all that said, I personally recommend this route. If you can get behind a more quiet and reserved character, you'll probably like Medusa. Her story is definitely worth giving a read. Now, I'll go on to Serena. Like Medusa, Serena is a more quiet and reserved character. Despite that, she has sharp wit on her side, giving her some very funny moments, which I quite appreciated. Now, Serena is a doctor, and a very skilled one at that. She seems good with critical thinking and making do with what she has, which is a very important skill when you're trapped on an island. Serena is a character who's responsible, loyal, and mature. She has to be, considering she is a doctor. While her sometimes pessimistic attitude was occasionally off-putting, it worked well with her personality and would be expected. The series is set on a deserted island, and all of our love interests are stranded there after a storm crashes their cruise ship. A generic setup to be sure, but it is done rather well in this instance. Serena's visual design is fairly basic, no bells and whistles here. She wears fairly formal attire, however it has become torn to shreds from living on the island. She has gorgeous black hair, and I've always been fond of her smiling sprite. Season 1 revolves around two things primarily. The first is the group trying to adapt to living on the island, and the other is a sickness that seemed to be spreading throughout the group, though Serena can't find the cause. I liked watching her and the MC work together on solving the issue, and growing closer all the while. They had a nice dynamic. Plus, while the guys were sick, shenanigans ensued, and I found them quite amusing. I like comedy in these routes. I don't know if anybody has noticed. Next is what I call the jealousy season, though thankfully it isn't too bad. The group comes to find out that there are more people on the island, including a doctor named Olivia, but she does some out there practices, which Serena doesn't approve of. Olivia also seems to be kind of touchy on the MC, and frankly, she can back the hell off. Olivia has just been getting up to some weird stuff, especially harping what seems to be a sentient plant monster for some reason. Let's just say, Serena doesn't like Olivia and thinks she's weird, and her medical practices are dangerous. And then everybody almost gets eaten. Season 3 is just kind of a season to wrap things up. Cyprin, who you may already know from Astoria's Fate's Kiss, comes on the island with news that 3 ancient monsters are on the island, causing all the trouble. The group is like, oh, that makes sense. But more important than that, Cyprin offers to get everyone off the island. Serena seems to not want that though, so between fighting off the monsters, MC and Serena have to talk about that, and more relationship development happens, even in the final season. Or it would have been the final season. Season 4 and 5 seem to be a renewed plot centric on them right after deciding to permanently live on this island. There's island spirits, one is this owl, and it kidnapped someone, and then the little village realized it was mad because the shrine had been neglected? Or something. I'll be real. I don't remember hardly anything about those seasons, other than that there was a wedding and liking that owl spirit. In my original script, that was made as I finished the 3rd season of this route, I lamented that it was criminally short, and I wish there was just one more season to delve more into Serena as a character and her background. Despite getting a full 2 more seasons, I cannot seem to remember learning anything more about her during them. It's a tad bit disappointing because I look on Serena as a somewhat incomplete character. I know so little about her other than what was already stated. Maybe I just forgot? I think Serena is a very good character, and her route was well paced and well written up to season 3. Due to me having very little memory of the latter 2 seasons, I choose to simply forgo commenting on them for now. If you like very straightforward characters, Serena might be the girl for you. And finally, Aurora. Out of these 3, Aurora has the most content surrounding her, hence me saving her for last. It has also been a tad bit since I read Aurora's route, so excuse any possible incorrect statements. Along with the most content, I think Aurora goes through the most character development, and it all feels believable. She starts out as a flirty, arrogant gangster with an alcohol problem, but by the end is shown to come down to earth a bit, and really cleans up her act. She wants to be someone her wife can be proud of, and I think that's really telling for her character. Gangsters in Love has a plot surrounding gang activity, so I can fully understand if people are turned off to this sort of story. However, I think it has a nice balance between the gangster stuff and the typical banter or character building. Aurora's visual design is, along with the others, pretty straightforward. I think what stands out the most is that her mid-back length hair has a slight ombre towards the bottom. She does get a new sprite about halfway through the series, not completely new, but her hair gets slightly longer, her bangs are gone, and she gets some new outfits. I've always been more fond of the second outfits and hairstyle, but I think the swoop bang look was really cute. Now, with a route this long, I won't cover each season individually, but I can give you a general idea about what this whole route is all about. The first few seasons primarily around Aurora and her character development. You learn about her and get to know what makes her tick. I frankly find her to still be one of the best showcases of just how well fleshed out these characters can be if given the time and energy from the writers. Her first season shows us a cocky and flirtatious gangster, and her having a reliance on alcohol is hinted here. From season 2 to 4, it's an uphill battle for her to become who she wants to be and to break her bad habits. Her seasonal conflicts are pretty typical for the whole series. The MC offers her practically photographic memory to be of use to the gang, and early seasons capitalize off of these characters being gangsters. Gambling and gang activity are front and center in these plots, though it begins to subtly decline in importance as Stella and Daisy are introduced. Now, I absolutely adore Stella. She is my favorite when it comes to kids in these series. She's very bold and comes off incredibly strong in her introductory season. Daisy is around less, but I also have a fondness for her. She's much more soft-spoken than her older sister, but she develops into a much more carefree child in season 9. I definitely prefer the older seasons, as I think Aurora's extensive character development is the shining crown of this route. Aurora's journey of growth slows considerably later in the story, so rather than seeing her actively change, you see the results of her self-improvement. This isn't a bad thing at all. Getting to see just how far she's come is rewarding. By the final season, Aurora has taken a very deep change. She no longer drinks, she is now fully committed to her wife and making her proud. She centers much of her life around her children, giving all that she can. I'd say she started off selfish and grew into a truly selfless character. I once said that Aurora was my favorite love interest. I'm not sure I would say that now, as I've read at least a dozen more routes, but she's still one of the best in terms of writing and character development. This is a route I cannot recommend enough. If you're ever willing to take the plunge, read Aurora's route. It's worth the time. Alrighty, that wraps it up for me today. I have been Rin Salamander, and thank you very much for listening. I once had said Aurora was my favorite lunch. My favorite lunch?